Hey, and welcome to Board with Life News for February 21st. Today I'm going to talk about Wildlands, Shadows in the Forest, Terraforming Mars Prelude, Prowlers Passage, and the Kickstarter for City of Gears. Let's get to it. Wildlands is a new game coming out from Osprey Games, and it's designed by Martin Wallace. Martin Wallace is primarily known for designing heavier Euros like Steam and Brass, A Few Acres of Snow. And this game is wildly different from that. It is a kind of miniature skirmish game, tactical combat with asymmetrical powers. So it's very interesting to see Martin Wallace kind of expand out of his normal wheelhouse. Lately, he's been doing some lighter Euro games. I was a big fan of Via Nebula that came out a couple years ago. So I'm always excited to see what he's doing, and he's one of the most famous designers. So in this game, you're going to have like different powers. It's going to have 20 unique miniatures, wizards, gnomes, beasts, warriors. Osprey Games has already announced that they're going to be releasing new maps as well as like new powers and stuff like that later in the year. So it's clear that they're going to kind of support this. And it seems like it's going to be kind of like a growing tactical miniatures game on a board, which is very exciting because Martin Wallace is great and the miniatures are cool, and Osprey Games has been killing it lately. Shadows in the Forest is a new version of a German game that came out about 30 years ago called Waldschattenspiel. Oh, I actually got it right. Waldschattenspiel? Haha! And this game has been kind of legendary in that there are not a lot of copies left around. It hasn't been in print for over 30 years. And it was a very unique mechanic where one player controls a candle in the middle of the board, and everybody else, like a literal flaming candle, and there are three-dimensional trees around the board, and everybody else is dwarves, and the dwarves are trying to hide in the shadows of the trees, where the person with the candle is trying to move the candle to hit the dwarves with light, and then they freeze if they're if they're hit with the light. So it's a really weird thing where you're using like the actual shadows being caused by the candle as like part of the game. In this new version, instead of dwarves, you're going to be nightlings, and they're these cute little miniatures with masks that you can take off whenever they get hit by the light. And it's going to have an electric light instead of a candle for safety reasons, but of course, you can do whatever you want when it's in your own house. So this is really exciting to see kind of a weird, unique mechanism in a game come back after so many years out of print. Terraforming Mars Prelude is the new small expansion for Terraforming Mars from Stronghold Games, the wildly popular game. In it, it's going to have new corporation cards as well as new Prelude cards. The Prelude cards are cards that you're going to draft at the beginning of the game. You're going to keep 2 of them, and they just kind of like start you down a path earlier in the game as opposed to getting to that path later when you're drafting throughout the rounds of the game. Stronghold Games also announced that there will be a larger, like, Venus Next size expansion coming out for Terraforming Mars at Spiel in 2018. So this game already has a bunch of expansions. There's a bunch more. They're coming out pretty rapidly. Honestly, the base game had more game that I was really interested in from the get-go. In terms of drafting, it was really overwhelming, and I already felt like I was going to need to play it like 5 or 10 times to really understand kind of all the drafting combinations and stuff like that. So I don't think it's a game that like needs expansions, but I do know that it's got a very rabid fan base and people that play the game a whole lot, so I'm sure that they are excited about more stuff for this game. Prowlers Passage is a new game coming out from Renegade Games, designed by Alex Cavern. It is a 2-player game where you are thieves competing to tunnel underneath the city, steal treasure, as well as assert your kind of control, your area majority control over different districts while you're doing that. Alex Cavern is one of my favorite designers. I think this is his 4th game with Renegade, and Renegade has just been killing it. Like almost every game they've released in the past couple years has been like a really solid game, so definitely excited about seeing this one come out. This week's Kickstarter is for City of Gears. City of Gears is an engine-building area control game where you are developers in an abandoned steampunk world, and you're trying to kind of like rebuild that steampunk world throughout. It's designed by Chris Leader and Daryl Andrews. Normally games, like bits in games, don't appeal to me that much. They do, and they can certainly make a good game great, and they can elevate it a little bit. But the way this game looks on the table is awesome. They have these modular player boards that are like these weird shapes, and then you have like these cogs that you put between them. They've got custom dice, all that kind of stuff. So just the look of this game was really appealing to me. It's $49 right now on Kickstarter, so if that sounds interesting to you, go back that. Alright, that's the news for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, as well as follow me on social media. I'm at Chris Bryan Games on Instagram and Twitter. Also, go check out my Patreon if you like what I do. I do weekly news videos. There's all sorts of exclusive content that you can gain access to by pledging there. Special thank you to Serge Katz for pledging last week. This week's question comes from @LiteraryBeard via Twitter. and they ask, what's the best convention for an aspiring designer to attend? So I'm omitting Unpubs and Protospiels that are just design-centric conventions, and I am sticking to conventions in North America just because that's what I know best. So I'm going to talk about 3 of them: Gen Con, Origins, and BGG Con. So if you are, it kind of depends where you're at in your design process and how much networking you've been able to do in the past. So if you're looking to network, if you're looking to kind of like get your first FaceTime with a publisher, that kind of stuff, BGG Con is a great convention for that. It's much more relaxed than Origins or Gen Con, and publishers are not nearly as focused on selling a bunch of product. So it's a lot easier to like have a little bit of time with them. They're way more open to sitting down and playing a game at that convention than Origins or Gen Con. I will say BGG Con is late in the year, so usually publishers already know their slate for the next year or 2 at that point. So there is a higher chance that it'll be longer period of time before they get to publishing your game if they do want to publish your game. But as long as that's not like a huge concern for you, it's not for me, that's not a big deal. Origins is kind of the best of both worlds between Gen Con and BGG Con. Way more publishers are going to be at Origins than BGG Con. Pretty much every major publisher is there. Publishers are certainly interested in selling their product there. They have new releases, but it's not as crazy as Gen Con. It's smaller than Gen Con, so it is easier to actually get some FaceTime, and there's a lot more table space there. So actually finding a table to sit down and play is a little bit easier than Gen Con. It's a good kind of in-between, and if you are interested in kind of hitting all the publishers, because not all the publishers come to BGG Con, that one's better for you. If you have already done some networking, if you already know some publishers, especially, and for all of these, you should contact the publishers beforehand via email or however they want in order to set up a time to pitch to them, just so that they're aware. It's a little bit more professional and it's easier because they're dealing with a ton of stuff at these conventions. But Gen Con, if you already had some FaceTime and it's not a raw introduction, is a good convention just because every publisher is there. So anybody that you can want to have time with, will be there. They won't necessarily have time for you, but they will be there. So that's a good one if you kind of are nurturing relationships or you just kind of want a huge net, even though really Origins has pretty much everything you want from that respect. All right, thanks for the question, and I will see you next week.